Hello world, welcome to this video in our Exercism series here on Ruby Gold. Today we're going to be looking at an exercise that is intended to teach strings. And being that it's still pretty early in the Exercism track for Ruby, we'll go through and first spend a little bit of time looking and getting familiar with the Exercism interface. If you already are familiar with the interface, you can skip right ahead and avoid this section. Get right into the exercise. But here we are, Ruby. This is a continuation of the lasagna after the lasagna video, so we can see that that exercise has been completed, as has the hello world. So from this interface, the overview, we can see that there's a couple of exercises that are unlocked and some others that I guess just don't have any dependencies. We can go to those directly, but we're going to stay up here with these little learning exercise highlights. I see. Okay, we're going to stay up here and just basically move through this program from the top to the bottom. So this is one way to look at it. Another way you can look is to come to this screen, which is kind of a neat concept because it groups everything by what the exercises are teaching. As I said today, we're going to be looking at the first string exercise. And as we do these, it unlocks the dependent exercises. And there's whole sections that we have yet to unlock. And then, yeah, so third way to look at the track is to go through here. And you could just kind of complete if you wanted from the top on down. I'm going to come back to this sort of map here just to show, there's dependencies. And if we did look here, scroll down to the bottom, we can see that there is, this twofer is dependent on something else. You can actually peek at the exercise ahead of time. And if you look, it's actually dependent on the logline parser, which happens to be the exercise we're going to do today. So we can jump right over to it. In this video series, I try not to make assumptions about what you've already done or already know. This is a beginner-friendly run-through of exercism. I present one option or maybe a couple options for solving these exercises. Essentially, I make suggestions, you make decisions. I stole that from one of my favorite Peloton instructors. But the basic idea is I want to show you some different approaches, different ways to interpret these, and hopefully some iterations. The only thing I really assume is that you have read through the instructions. I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time digging through these introductions. So they're written with the assumption that you're brand new to at least Ruby, if not programming in general, and they give you some basics on, in this case, what a string really is. What I like to do is just sort of jump into the exercise and go from there. So it's very helpful if you have read through it before, so you know what's going on and what to expect. But even if you haven't, you'll probably be able to make do with just following along. So in my last video, I came to the realization that there's no longer the actual test file or test cases that I can view in advance, which is kind of strange. I'm not really sure why Exercism chose to get rid of that file with the test cases, as they are sort of super critical to the Exercism experience, at least in my time on the platform. But we can still do a high-level overview. We can see we've got a Ruby class. The exercise here is log line. We can see it's in the standard format for these beginner exercises. It's just a basic Ruby class that initializes, has a couple of methods, which we'll be implementing. As of right now, they don't do anything. So I like to start by running the tests, and we should get failures on every test. All right, cool. So we have 11 tests that we're going to pass. And if you've been following along, you know that we only have three methods here to implement. So several of our tests will be for the same methods. Or if you want to think of it differently, several of them will be for the same tasks within the exercise here on Exercism. So standard way to probably use exercism is you would just read through these and implement them. But like I said, I like to go from the test method, practice a little bit of the experience of test-driven development. And so we can see like what happened here. Well, the test basically spits out a runtime error. So if we do the smallest change we can, we just get rid of the message, run the tests again. Our test will still fail, but we start getting information about what's failing and why. Now, the first one is always pretty basic expectation. Our method doesn't do anything. So when the test attempted to call a new logline instance and send it the message method, so send the message a little bit confusing for object-oriented bit there, because we send a message to an object, and in this case the message is called message. So we could play with the wording and say we're sending a method over, or we can continue to say we're sending a message. We're sending the message to our object. A little bit of fun, confusing thing there. And, you know, it's the running joke that naming things is one of the hardest problems in computer science. Regardless, we can see that when we call for message, we expect to get this response. What we actually get is nil. So let's go with the simplest way to implement this, and then we'll check and see what tests pass, and if we need to change this in a way that we actually get something meaningful back. So by hard coding the value here, this will always return the same, but we don't necessarily always want that back from message. Since we're passing in a parameter or an argument here, there's a good chance that we'll pass one test, but not more than one, even though probably several of the tests are for this method in particular. Okay, cool. So yeah, we got one test to pass, and that was the one we were looking at where we got Stack Overflow back. But we also can see that test 2 does a similar thing where it instantiates a new object and sends the message with a parameter, an argument. So we can see that, yes, this is one of those scenarios where we did pass the test, but we didn't really pass the spirit of the test. So it looks like we actually have to do something a little bit different here. And basically, if we look at the way these two tests are written, they both have a format which includes this front bit, error, warning, etc., and then an actual message. And so as we start putting the pieces together, we sort of can assume that what the intention of this method is that we want to have our logline parser receive a message that's going to have some extra stuff on it, right? So this error and warning. And what we actually want to do is find this final part of it, right? That's where the assertion comes into play. So in reality, if the argument that's sent over is this, and I'm just doing some pseudocode here, we want to basically find this part in here. So there's quite a few approaches to doing this. We basically might, so we can see that the argument itself doesn't go to message. What it goes to is the logline parser, right? So a little bit of Ruby understanding here is that when we create a new logline parser, we're sending it this argument, which gets caught by the initializer. and get stored in our local line variable. So within here, we happen to know that we can call line. And if we just run this, our test will fail. But we can see some kind of interesting stuff here. We can see that we do get the line. So again, we basically know that our line contains something extra. And we just want that last part of it. So we can do maybe a couple of things. Let's see if there's anything helpful in the instructions here. So here's something. We sort of get this G sub, capitalize, yeah. So we also have a split. That's interesting. Slices and splits, maybe indexes. So we know that a couple of things, if you read through this, we know that strings kind of act as arrays, and so we can do these like splits and other similar operations on them. So maybe what we're interested in is taking, if we split our line, let's see, where's split in here? Here. So we basically can tell it what to split by. And so maybe what we are interested in is if we look again at our tests, we can see that they follow a similar format. And so we might be inclined to say, let's split on that little break there. But I think just for safety, I'm going to split on the colon itself, because I feel like I can pretty confidently assume there's going to be a colon there, but this space I'm not too sure about. So what we get at this point then will be essentially an array of two things. So in our example, the first test, it would be error and a string with a space on the front, or warning. Was it error or warning? Yeah, error. Right. So we get an array, which is now feels like moving us further away from what we're actually trying to do here. But bear with me. What we know is that our array contains two items in it, assuming that these error messages are all going to be standardized. And so essentially, we can do a couple of things here. Maybe we always want to take the second element. And so that looks like it gets us pretty close. We just have that last bit. And the instructions also showed another string method here. So maybe we just want to take that result and strip it, right? So this is Ruby chaining here. We're calling line, and on that we are splitting on this character and taking the second value in the array, so index of 1, and whatever's there we're stripping, and that whole thing gets returned from when the message is called. And so, wow, we actually passed 4 tests. And I just put this in here to show you this is happening. But with Ruby, we do have the implicit return. The one, we know that the last line of a method gets returned. So there's no need to have a keyword in there. And I follow the rule that if you don't need it, don't use it. So we're going to take that out. Run the test one more time. Our 4 tests should still pass. So that's pretty good. Error, warning, info messages all seem to be fine. Here, yeah, so this this indicates a requirement that could potentially have these, so tabs and new lines and returns and these other characters. that all fall within that realm of trailing white space. So using strip on this was pretty useful because it basically took care of all those. And that's why part of why I didn't want to get too fussy about, what does this look like in here? Because in this example, if we had that, I think, no, it's still, okay, so there's still a white space there, or several white spaces. But even in that example, we can see if there are several white spaces, then the difference being that, again, we actually would have split on multiple white spaces and had still some trailing white spaces. But regardless, this looks pretty good. It's maybe not my favorite way to write this, but so far it gets us to pass 4 tests. And if I look ahead at the failing tests, I can see that we're sending a different message. We're sending log level. So we're calling a different method, and we are going to move on to that. So this is okay for now. We might clean it up later. We might leave it the way it is. We'll see when we implement these if we need to make any modifications. So log level, we can run our tests again. And now we actually have a helpful error message here. Maybe not too helpful because, again, we're just returning nil, even though we expect something. But we can get kind of a sense that looks like we've got 3 tests that are probably going to be implementing the log level method. And it's pretty clear to see what's happening is we actually want what's inside of that case there. So what we can probably do at this point is maybe start out in a similar manner. And instead of taking the second one, maybe we'll take the first one. And let's just see what we get. So what do we get? Well, that's certainly not the response I expected to see here. So assert equal this and this. So name error, undefined local variable or method line. Did I copy the wrong thing? So typos get me every time. Okay. Yeah, so this was definitely not an error message I was expecting, but if we actually read into it, we can see I was calling line, and it looks like I must have copied it without the @ sign. So let's run that again. Okay, good. We get a more useful error message. So of course, like Rubyist stuff. Yeah. No, sorry, I was going to tangent, and I think I'm not going to tangent here. Maybe later. But now we can see, so we're getting closer. But we still have things surrounded, and we also have some other problems, case issues, for instance. But this is all right as a start. In this case, we probably don't need strip, but we're just going to leave it there in case, because we don't want any wayward spacing issues, white space characters to throw us off. So there's now many ways to go about this. If we look into the instructions here and the string methods that it presents to us, we could do a number of things. We could maybe find some indexes. So we know that there's opening and closing square brackets around the error indicator. What is it? The log level itself. So maybe we do some index stuff and find with like a slice. Maybe we find our indexes and slice out of those. That to me feels a little bit too convoluted. Right, so here this essentially gets us, something that looks like So if we were going to do like index this and store that somewhere, and then index this and store that somewhere, right? So whoops, right? So if we store some local variables, and this is not code that I'm recommending at all. This is not code. I'm just trying to walk you through my thought process here and why this is maybe a little too convoluted. And I'm hoping that at least someone watching this video has tried this method, and that spending this time sort of helps you see why it wasn't a great approach. So then we could do something like maybe this. Right, and this is very convoluted, and I don't write code like this. So if we took this and sliced it, and we took everything from index 1, and actually, let's see, index 2. I know this is going to not be correct, but let's run it and see what we get, just to like sort of see how we're going down. Okay, so yep, I see. We started at index 1, and actually what we wanted was, and this should kind of give it away, like this is starting to get pretty weird, right? And then this would actually need, it looks like, the reverse of that. So we go one past the index and one before the index. So like that highlights our word here, but I really don't like that. It's kind of convoluted, and then we would just need to actually do something for the casing. But in this scenario, I might actually do something like this, following this example here, where I take our output and I chain another method on here, right? And I give it essentially nope. There we go. Okay, so basically what I'm looking to split out is these two characters. And to do that, I probably need to so I need to, let's see. Oh, yep, okay, whatever. So let's go to Ruby doc and let's find the G sub. So pattern replacement, how do we figure out the patterns? Okay, it's not particularly helpful, is it? Okay, substitution methods. Here we go. So this shows us argument pattern, and let's see if we can figure this out. I don't want the white space stripping. I just want to be able to grab special characters. So yeah, I'm not very familiar. I'm not at all familiar. I thought maybe, you know what? Maybe we just need to try it. Let's see what happens if we just, well, this is going to throw several errors. Skip ahead. Let's just see if that, okay. Yeah. So I thought maybe, whoops, let's see. I'm looking for an escape sequence. Ah, okay. I just had my things backwards. So I'm going to get rid of this because we're not using that method at all. And I just want to make sure that the errors I'm getting relate to what we actually have here, right? So what I ended up doing was using these backslashes for escape sequences to escape and basically say, find these symbols, but don't use them for the pattern matching expression. And then I'm taking just an empty, basically this is equivalent to saying nothing, right? Replace it with nothing because there's this string here has nothing in it. So it's like basically saying if you find either opening bracket or closing bracket, replace it with nothing. So we can see then that these tests, what they return. Oh, no, it's not working because we're still getting the brackets in there. Okay, so Ruby G sub find square brackets, right? And so this is actually, you know, how you often go about this stuff. And searching on Google or whatever search engine might be useful. So let's see if any of these articles give us an indicator as to how to find so seemingly not that one. It's so close. Find the text in the within the square brackets, but what we are actually trying to find is the square brackets. Let's see what this says. So here they are. Let's see what an answer says. So potentially our problem is that we need to enclose okay. Yeah, so we needed to wrap the whole thing inside of square brackets to basically say, find the set of these things. Let's see, do I have expressions? I don't have that installed. Okay, so I don't have a pattern reg x test. Let's see if we can do this. Okay. I have no familiarity with any of these tools, but if we are saying find the set of this and this, yep. Maybe I should actually learn where my keys are. All right, so in this scenario, basically blah something blah, right? Okay, so I'll look at this little explainer here. So match a single character present in the list below, right? So I guess these openings and closing brackets are saying the list, and then we're actually doing literally find the character. All right, so that was a long tangent to figure this out. But it looks like when we come back here, we are getting what we intend to get. And then at this point, it's just sort of trivial that we can just return the downcased value. So yeah, we've got those tests passing. And this is pretty gnarly method here. There may be ways to clean that up. Do so more consistently. So I actually, I'm going to take a moment here and do sort of a tangent. And since I've got some repetition here, I actually kind of want to do, I'm going to modify this and take an argument that is index, and I want it to have a default of 1. So we're passing in an index with a default of 1. So if we don't pass it, is that right? So we know that the method itself is not setting an index. So we definitely want it to come out as 1. And what that gets us then is, I actually don't need to store that in a variable anymore. So in theory here, if I do this and I tell it to return something to me, we are still passing. So basically, I already have this method, and it allows me to sort of streamline that. And then if I change this, then I just need to change that. I like to use keyword arguments, or named parameters, named arguments. And this just lets me be explicit. It's probably not necessary here, but I do like the explicit nature of it. It's like, what is that 0 or 1 meaning? And so in this case, because it's a very controlled example, we know that a line has going to result in 2 indexes. When we split, it just sort of lets us shortcut to that. Yeah, so this is I would argue this is a little bit better implementation. And so we know this works. Essentially what we get away with is the way that this works is because this is all stuff on the same object, the same instance of logline parser. And so that's the equivalent of calling on itself this method. But again, we don't need that, so we'll just take it out. All right, cool. And then we have 4 tests failing, and it looks like we're at the reformat method. So you'll have noticed by now, hopefully, that we've not done anything. I have not yet opened up these instructions. And from my perspective, somebody has gone through and written these tests for us. And so they've thought through the implementation and what should be going. Now, in the real world, that's not really going to be the scenario, and you will probably have to refer to your ticketing system, your design system, well, not design system, but wherever the issue you're working on, the task you're working on is defined. You're probably going to have to, well, you're almost certainly going to have to write some of your own tests. You're going to have to figure out a lot of that stuff. So this is kind of convenient because someone has already done that here on Exercism. Now, if you run this from the command line using the command line tool from Exercism, you can write your own test cases. You can add test cases. You can modify them. When you submit them back up to Exercism itself, it's the tests have to run that are defined by Exercism, but it's you would have access to that. But here, like, it's kind of useful because we can sort of intuit that these tests are going to match what's over here, but it's almost in some sense more of a pure way to look at this. And in case these are written in a way that's confusing, we just know that we're passing the tests. So kind of artificial, but this is the way I like to go about these as much as I can. Now, these are very easy exercises. We're manipulating strings. It's not that big of a deal. There may be some where you actually need to read those. And it can also be helpful because sometimes as you develop your sense for coding, you can sort of jump to those conclusions yourself. But continuing down, let's look at reformat. We know that's going to be an error. We want a different error message, so we're going to change that. We get nil, which is fine. And we see this here. So it looks like, based on this, the reformat changes the output. So instead of this, somebody wants it in this format here. So that actually, kind of seems pretty convenient. And this shouldn't take too much to do because we already have essentially our components. So conceivably, we're taking the message and to that, we are appending a space, an opening parenthesis, the log level, and a closing parenthesis. And it passes. But don't do it this way, right? So obviously I was writing it on the expectation that this is bad code. But just for the demonstration purposes, for those of you following along, this shows us like that's the basic format. All the components, because we did these two methods, all the basic components are here. So it's really about how do we structure this string? And if I submit this, it's going through, generating automatic feedback. I'm really disappointed. I was really hoping that there'd be some immediate feedback available because of the way that I wrote this, but it's going to pass. This would be a great opportunity if you wrote this code. I would highly recommend that you request a code review so that someone else, a volunteer on the Exercism platform, looks at your code and they're going to give you some ideas. They will probably also critique everything else in here. But now we have an iteration and we know we want to work on this a little bit more. That last method is terrible. So there's different ways to do this. We can get we can literally concatenate message open log level close, right? And that probably doesn't work. Why? Because I guess you got to call concat on something. Yeah, so if we start an empty string and concatenate this onto that, that works. We can submit that and have a second iteration. This will still process, it still passes. I still don't like that. Let's go back into the editor. What might be another way to do this? Let's see, what is in here? Yeah, I was wondering if maybe they had a suggestion here that was pretty good. Not really. Here's probably what the authors of this exercise intended you to do. So something like, we'll move that down and start fresh. So if we use this, we are basically saying it's going to be an interpolated string. So message log level. Yeah, let's actually interpolate this correctly. Oops, let's change these to curly brackets. And okay, so what do we got? What do we got wrong here? It's a segmentation fault. Oh, I read this backwards. So it's not something I use frequently. I read this backwards. We actually want to go with that method for an interpolated string. And so what I was hoping to show you the first time was this little quirk here where we can use sort of anything we want, square brackets. So this is sort of very like out of the depth of this exercise. But when we're doing these percent open closers, they just kind of want delimiters on the front and back. You can use just about anything. And can you even use like dots? Yeah, I don't know that you can use like numbers or something, but let's find out. Probably not, because this looks like it's getting some syntax out of it. Yeah, so it doesn't like that, but it seems like characters are pretty wide open. So here, this way works. And that's cool. It's a little strange. Like, why wouldn't we just do that? And there are reasons, you know, depending on how this is used, if you're using it elsewhere. There are reasons, I suppose, to use that syntax, that version of, I think that's also a version of literal syntax. Yeah, there's still literals, but honestly, for like clarity's sake, I like this because it's easy to parse, especially for a beginner, that this is making a string and we're interpolating it. And so you may also notice that here we're not doing interpolation. And if you read through the instructions, right, you have the two options, and you may be familiar with that already. And single quotes don't get interpolated, double quotes do. I've, over the years, followed the advice of people much smarter than me, and I've formed the habit that use double quotes by default. Even if you're not going to interpolate, use double quotes by default. It makes your life a lot easier. You have to change less code if you later change your mind and want to interpolate, and you can just be more consistent, and then you're not getting a mix match of single and double quotes. There will still be cases where it does happen, and certainly, like the example says, if you're going to have quotes inside of what you're interpolating, this might be more helpful. But in this case, this is just a clean, simple way to go about it. So I like this. It passes our tests, and I think this is a good place to stop. What I would highly recommend for you is whether you followed along with my example or you came up with your own example. This really bugs me, this G sub. There's got to be a better way. There's probably like find like not letter characters or something. But anyway, what I would highly recommend is whether you followed along with my example or you just watched my example and did your own. This exercise is a great way because we're doing string transformations, string manipulations. This is a great exercise to get some additional coaching from. Now that I have submitted some solutions, I could go to the community solutions and see how other people have solved this. I highly recommend that to see what other people are doing. Let's see, this is a 10 stars, 66 stars. This person has 66 stars. Let's see. Oh my. They love pattern matching. So it's a very different approach. This 10 star, let's see. What do? They don't use, so yeah, they use that index method. Here we are. This person kind of went down a similar road to me. Looks like they moved stuff into the initialization. So they're just returning very, very basic messages here. That's kind of interesting, clean. It's not terrible, but my initial thoughts is like, you're sort of moving the code away from the method. And so like, if you want to change message, you have to like change code in an initializer. So I don't love that. I don't know, it works here, but I don't really like it. It looks like maybe there's some similar thinking people. Yeah, let's see. Anyone else have this one has a star. Let's see what they do. Interesting. So they're counting on the square brackets being in certain positions, basically the first and last character. To do that, what else do we have? Can I sort by? I can't sort by stars or anything. Okay. Well, you can see there's plenty of different ways. There is a wealth of information that you could get through if you do request that someone gives you additional mentoring. Also, if you're watching this video on YouTube, feel free to add comments about your solution, critique my solution. I love critiquing. I'm always open to learning. I've got some problems. I see some problems with the code. It's a good enough solution. I would probably pass it if I received this in a code review at work. But yeah, let me know if you found this helpful. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment. Let me know that you found this helpful. Click the thumbs up button. They give me motivation to continue this series. Yeah, and subscribe. That would be great. Or keep paying attention here. I'm going to continue on these exercises. It takes me a little bit of time to get them out, but the eventual goal is that I have a solution submitted for you to view. It looks like I need to mark this as complete. So now I'm complete. There's no dig deeper. This video should appear in the dig deeper. And once it has been approved for that, you'll see there will also be a dig deeper here. I'm attempting to submit these videos for all of the exercises in the Ruby track because that's what we're doing right now here in this video series is Let's Code here in Ruby Gold. And yeah, cool. Great. Thanks for following along. And remember, there's gold in them there rubies.